was just having a conversation with this young, beautiful lady, and I talked to her about what the women's school is about, which is really about training the woman like you would train in Olympics, and taking responsibility for designing and redesigning a fulfilling life. And her response to it, she's like, "That's so exciting, January, but you shouldn't use the word responsibility or hard work. Nobody wants that." And so my response, my thought process was, why? Why are women today afraid of the word discipline, responsibility, and hard work? How are we training our young women, our mothers, that they are now, that there's almost this sort of trigger when we think of hard work and discipline, and our response to it is no longer sort of, yes, that's what I want. Because in order to be an honorable woman, in order to have a moral compass, in order to actually be happy, there needs to be a sense of responsibility. There needs to be an awareness of hard work, of sacrifice. And we have entitled our culture to a point where we're triggered by the very thing that actually leads to our greater happiness. Think about it. Can you, as a woman, really be happy if you're not growing? Can you, as a woman, be fully happy if you are not taking responsibility for your own growth, your own mistakes, your own ability to train yourself and study yourself? And the answer is no. I love that Tony Robbins talks about, the common theme, and also scientifically, we've studied, the data has given us evidence that happy people have one thing in common, and that's called progress. And that's what Tony Robbins talks about, is progress makes us feel happier, which means that we are progressing towards something greater than our current situation, our current self, which means that we are growing. But in order to grow, there has to be a responsibility that we need to grow. But yet we are afraid of the language that invites us to greater responsibility, that it becomes now a trigger in our culture to think, to use the word hard work and sacrifice and discipline, and we shun away from the very thing that actually fulfills the woman. So, in my opinion, there is a new woman rising from all this craziness of, I can do whatever I want, and I'm only going to, allow things that feel good, that are easy, comfortable, what's going to give me instant gratification. And what we are seeing is women already know that it doesn't fulfill them. So there is a new woman, I think, that's rising from this ashes, who's saying, you know what, that's not going to make me happy. Data tells me it's not. I also don't feel it. Doing whatever I want is not actually leading to my greater fulfillment. Just because I can, that doesn't mean I should. Which means that we have to change the language in our own culture to match what actually fulfills us, and not use language that actually deceives us to the life that we deeply desire, which is to be fully alive, to have so much life, to be inspired, to be peaceful, to love the woman we're becoming. And yet we're afraid of responsibility, hard work, sacrifice, delayed gratification. There's a new woman that's rising in this narrative, and she is a woman who takes responsibility for her growth. She's a student of herself, other people, and the world around her. She understands the signs of our time and stays vigilant against the face of evil. Let me break this down. For us to actually face evil, temptation, manipulation, susceptible to toxicity, we have to be vigilant. We have to be awake and aware. We need to be studying what's happening in our world. We need to be studying a reaction to what's happening in our world. We need to be studying ourselves. Are we being manipulated? Are we growing as a woman in our skill set? We need to be studying people. Are the people around us becoming more disciplined? Are the people around us taking responsibility for their life? As women, we ought to be pillars of society, pillars of strength, of hope, and of peace. And if we are not those pillars of peace, then we risk a culture who's weakened by evil. If a woman is no longer strong interiorly, then she's incapable of elevating the culture around her, beginning with her own home. She now is susceptible to anxiety, stress, chaos. Therefore, she cannot even defend herself, defend her family, and defend evil. No matter if you want to. You can be a woman of faith and say, I'm going to fight evil. We need to, bring moral truth, and we need to make sure that we bring in God in our school. But if your life isn't peaceful, your marriage doesn't feel alive, your children see the, I would say, hypocrisy in what you're preaching and what you're teaching and how you're living, they're not going to want to live a life of faith. So what am I saying? The antidote is humility. Humility comes from the root word humus, which is rich, dark soil in which all things can grow from, which means that we are to take responsibility for our own growth. So the invitation that I'm asking you is, don't be afraid of words that bring greater strength in you: responsibility, honor, growth, hard work, sacrifice, discipline. That's the kind of woman that we need for such a time as this. We need warriors for truth. We need women that are going to armor up against the face of evil, who is not afraid of evil. I think of the, what is that movie, that Secretariat? Have you seen that movie? It's a beautiful movie about the Triple Crown. I think I'm saying that right. And there's a beautiful scene in there where the horse is coming around the corner, and she's, there's a sort of scripture of she is unafraid in the face of evil. And it's this powerful scene, and it's narrated by a woman's voice. And I thought, a woman who stays vigilant, who is disciplined, who studies herself so she can grow more, so she can give more of herself. Not the self-study of like, oh, I know I'm just horrible, I'm not good. Study that leads to self-loathing, right? Complaining of who we are and who we're not, as opposed to study for the sake of improving and growing is what we need, because we're all broken. We all fail at some point in our life or every day. And it's not our failure, it's how we rise from those ashes of failures. Then that gives rise to a woman wiser than she was when she failed, rather have harvested wisdom from her failure. Therefore, now she's stronger than she was yesterday. This is the kind of woman that day in and day out, in the quiet of her own silence, she is armoring up her interior life to face the battle of evil around her, because she is facing the battle within her. She studies, she's in the quiet. We're looking at the news, we're looking at the world, we're looking at ourselves, and we're seeing the actions, interactions, and reactions of ourselves in the world. We're not just going to take the world for what it is. Let me give you an example. Disney. 3 years ago, never would I have imagined that the craziness that I am seeing right now with Disney. And I think there's a movie, and don't quote me because I don't, I didn't watch it, but the premise of the movie is that this woman was impregnated by the devil. How are we not uprising against Disney? Have we weakened the woman so much that she can say to herself, that's just one movie, I don't really like, that part of it, but Disney is, I still love going to Disney World. It's kind of a childhood memory. Or as a response, an accurate response would be, let me study what Disney's doing to our children. Let me study what other things that Disney's doing, because no business is perfect. I run a business myself, and maybe there's parts of it. But to study and to stay vigilant, and based on our study and research, take a stand against evil. And so for me, this is just my own research, my opinion, that I've seen a massive agenda in Disney that I think, to me, is opposed to my own moral compass. Now, I have a choice and say, not really a big deal. It's just kind of a little part. Still really love Disney and the park is good. Or I can say, you know what? I either stand for evil or stand for what is good. Lukewarm spews me out of this world, and therefore the women who are quiet and comfortable and lukewarm are actually the ones that is empowering evil. And I'm not saying that that's an easy stand. I'm saying it's a journey of awareness, of skill building, of faith, of discipline to even come to that point of your decision. And you have to make your own decision. And I think it's really a journey of conviction based on study and awareness. But to not study at all is to tolerate the growth of evil around us, because we're essentially saying, I'm just going to stay in my own little cocoon, be comfortable. I don't need to address issues. Well, there's a spiritual warfare around us. We either sit back, sit in our own little cocoon and pretend like it's not happening, or we can invite women and say, women, it's not the time for slumber. It is a time to armor up, which means that if we're going to war against evil, then you best take responsibility for your own growth and studying your ability to manage your mind, your ability to make decisions, your ability to manage your home, your ability to manage your emotion, your ability to make decisions, your ability to protect your children from things that are actually imposing evil upon them. I mean, the propaganda, your ability to be kind, your ability to speak up, but speak as so that you can be heard, not shout out and scream, but rather discipline your tongue, your ability to be so in command of your emotion that you're in the face of critics, you can manage yourself, have a smile on your face, and create an invitation inspite hard conversation. I mean, everything is accounted for right now. There's, when you're at war, there's no time to just be like, well, maybe I won't use that. No, you're trying to protect your land. And in this case, it's our home. In this case, it could be our country, it could be our community, it could be our faith life. And so I don't think we have time to waste, to binge into our own lack of discipline, of Netflix, of food, of social media, and say, I'm just going to turn a blind eye to what's happening in our current world. There is a deep obligation for us to protect the next generation. And I can't speak for men. I can only speak for women. I do believe that it is a complementary. I think the complementarity of men and women is crucial in every battle. And let me just say this, women 100 years ago did not have the privilege to vote, to owning a property. We were, in some essence, incapable of being in the marketplace. Men and women fought for our freedom. We need to celebrate the journey of freedom that we've been able to actually acquire, because I believe that God desires all men to have freedom. I think that's our God-given gift, is to have the freedom to become who we were created to be and not be inhibited, to speak freely. But it's not just having freedom, it's taking responsibility amidst our freedom. It's not just doing whatever we want or we feel like without thinking of the consequence behind our actions, our thoughts, our reactions, our emotions. Everything has a ripple impact. It's cause and effect. And women today, we have to take a step back and see what is happening in the world, what is happening in my own interior world, what is happening in my family, and say, you know what? Maybe I wasn't into politics. Maybe I wasn't studying the world. Maybe I wasn't doing my homework. Maybe I wasn't paying attention to my own growth. But gone are those days, because when the world is burning around you, there's a level of urgency of the need for women to armor up for such a time as this, to take responsibility for our own growth. And that's the invitation that I want all of us to reflect upon, is we need warriors for truth. Women warriors look a lot like disciplined, responsible, hardworking, able to sacrifice, humble, strategic, vigilant for such a time as this. Now, that all sounds grand and great, but that requires a death of self. Discipline is a death of self. To give yourself a command, do something that you want to do for the sake of a greater outcome, is it a form of death? Right? We are to live the death and resurrection every single day of our life. Discipline is a form of death. Now, eventually, it won't be as hard. Maybe it was harder to say no. It used to be really hard for me to say no to rice. I love rice. I'm Filipino. We eat rice, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I was pre-diabetic, and I knew that every single time I had rice, I would get tired when I showed up with my kids, and I was too tired to actually fully be present with them. And also when I trained women, I wasn't as sharp. So I had to say no to myself, and it was not it was not an easy battle because it was so habitual, neurologically rewired in my system. My body was so used to it. And I would always tell my husband, I'm like, you cannot make me give up rice. But actually, God could only be the one who made me give up rice, because I realized I couldn't fulfill my God-given call to be fully alive as a mother that I want to be, and also to train as a teacher, simply because it wreaked havoc in my system, and it made me it actually made me forget a lot of things. And it was interesting because I studied then what rice was. And I know it sounds so simple, but this is what I mean to be a student of ourselves, student of the people, and student of the world. And I realized there was a lot of arsenic in rice that actually cause, for some people, poison. And I would start to forget things in conversation. I remember I was in a conversation with Lila Rose, and I was like blanking out. And I'm like, where was I? This was such an important conversation about, the life and the dignity of the human person. And this was a few years ago, and I kept retracing what was happening to me. And it was because I would have, I love rice, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I just was so susceptible to it. But compounding that, I was sort of pre-diabetic, and all rice turns to sugar. Why am I saying this to you? Because I needed to study what I was eating, how it impacted my health, how it impacted my mindset, how it impacted my ability to develop myself and my skill set, that I needed to learn how to say no to myself. And that was not an easy journey. I literally vowed to myself I was never going to give it up, but I vowed to my husband. I know it was a joke, but not really. But if I didn't study the impact of that, I probably would still suffer unnecessarily, but my children would suffer because I couldn't be fully alive around them, because I was incapable of, just from a physical standpoint, from a tired and brain fog. Now, obviously, not everybody's going to have that reaction to rice. That was just my reaction to it, because I probably have had way too much of it. The point is that we have to study how all the external things that are coming into our life impacts us. And that's what I mean by staying vigilant. The warrior needs to be awake in order to be fully alive. And the warrior needs to pay attention to every arena of her life, because that's what's going to give her greater sustained generosity and capacity for greater contribution. Remember, as women, our life is an act of contribution. We are called to be masterpiece. We're here to elevate men, honor the sacredness of childhood. And the only way we do that is if we develop who we ought to become. And armor up in humility and responsibility, so we become a woman ready to fight the battle of evil around us. Now, it also means that by us armoring up, we are also inspiring the people that we love to pick up and armor up for themselves, because a disciplined woman is inspiring to those around her. A woman who takes responsibility for her own growth is inspiring to those around her. And just pause for a second. Who are the women around you that are humble enough to grow, that are constantly, working on their layers of discipline, that are studying the world and staying vigilant? They're attractive to you. You want to be around them, unless you are suffering comparison, competition, or there's something that is unfulfilled in your life. You don't actually want to be around them. Now, if this is you, there's a lot of us, and it's all part of us learning about ourselves and being vigilant, because that's often the reason why we don't want to be around women who are disciplined or successful, whatever we define it, however you define success, because we actually feel insecure about it. That's also a form of vigilance and awareness about ourselves. So, but my point is that people that are responsible and disciplined are attractive. It's inspiring. Why? Because we actually are ordered towards what is good. We want that is good. And instead of being afraid of it, being in fear of it, and being in competition with it, let's harvest from it. So a woman who's capable of living that responsible and disciplined life then elevates everyone else around her, her children, her daughter, her friend. If you're single, even you're in high school, it does. It raises the bar for everyone. So what happens is that if a woman creates a standard of responsibility, of honor, being a woman of your word, and grows, then you raise everyone else's standard around you just by simply fulfilling your duty to honor your ability to become fully who you were created to be. Because make no mistake, the woman that God commissioned you to be requires growth, responsibility, hard work, discipline, and vigilance. Why? Because otherwise she could be susceptible to evil. Therefore, you're incapable of doing the work and the will of God that has put that deep desire in your heart to be fulfilled. An undisciplined woman is incapable of actually doing what God has asked her to do. Even though it sounds really great, I am here, I'm going to do what God wants me to do. I'm a woman of faith. I'm going to be faithful, love Jesus. An undisciplined life is incapable of sustaining a love for Jesus. So, the women's school is open to all faith. I think that I respect people's journey on their own faith. I'm just sharing with you my own personal faith. And regardless of what your faith is, in order for us to fulfill a moral compass, we have to grow and take responsibility for our own growth. We have to grow in our own layers of discipline. So go out there, ladies, and study our culture, study what's happening. Don't look at just the news and the mainstream news and what's go out there. Dig a little bit deeper, because that's what I found when I dig a little bit deeper, was there was a sinister agenda behind it. Go study the pharmaceutical companies that are imposing a lot of, I would say, unhealthy standards to our society. There's even a labeling war. I was studying all the different labels and how they go through the labels and labeling food. There's a lot of deception. So even though you're buying organic, even though you're buying natural flavor is actually not natural. It's actually a deception. It's actually a form of preservatives for some of them. So there's a lot of deception out there. So don't take everything face value. Be that woman who does her own research and homework, so that you can stay vigilant. We can't just be a victim and be handed over what a doctor tells us, what our government tells us, what our boss tells us, what the school tells us, and not actually dig a little bit deeper. We have to now look at what our children are learning in our school system, because there's a lot of pornography that's being infused at a very young age. And it's hard for me to actually sometimes fathom how far we've come as a society, that pornography is now acceptable in our public school system and in such a young age. The innocence of childhood should be something we can stay united and not actually have a political war against. Now what I'm seeing is this is a complicated issue that is now political, as opposed to, wait a minute, there should not be a battle between politics to protect the sacredness and the innocence of a child. This should be universal. But maybe the woman has become so corrupt, she's incapable of seeing that, no, we do not expose our children at a very young age to sexuality. They're incapable of actually processing. A 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, they're incapable of processing that. It's the same thing with the mutilation that's happening right now with our transgender movement. There is an obligation for the woman to protect the against the transgender movement who is mutilating our children before they're incapable of actually making their own decision. A 3-year-old, I saw a mother was sort of almost imposing their own view on a 3-year-old and saying, well, if you feel like a boy today, then you can be a boy. Well, my daughter also felt like she was a doll. My son felt like he was a monkey and was acting like a monkey for a few weeks. I'm not going to tell him he's a monkey. I mean, what is happening? And to me, goes back to when our life is not whole, when parts of our life are not fulfilled, we are susceptible to propaganda, toxic ideologies, and actually evil. This is why life of wholeness is a prerequisite to me, is an antidote to fighting evil. But the only way we do that is we study ourselves. We study what's going on in the world. We're studying the movement around us. We're studying the fact that we are now, mothers are now being reduced to birthing parent. What happened to the sacredness of motherhood? What happened to the reverence of motherhood? Now, our responsibility is to make motherhood so attractive that women will want to be mothers. Maybe we have been irresponsible in the way we have communicated motherhood, that we are falsely advertising motherhood as a place of stress, anxiety, lack of dreams, losing ourselves so hard. Who wants to sign up for that? And by the way, your children are listening to whatever you're saying about motherhood. We have a responsibility to advertise the reverence of being a woman, being a mother, being a wife. What does that look like? It goes back to being vigilant in what's happening in our world right now and how we have become susceptible to false agendas, to agendas of a low, lack of moral compass that's making us, I would say, fall into the rat race of doing. We are forgetting what it means to be. We're just so tired of the spin of life that we're not taking the time to reflect deeply on our universal purpose as women and our unique and irreplaceable purpose in each season of our life, because there's no season of life without a purpose, whether postpartum, teenagers, grandmothers, all of us have a unique and irreplaceable purpose, especially for such a time as this. Therefore, our call to take responsibility for our growth is what's needed to be vigilant in our world today. So armor up, ladies. It's the time for us to go to war against evil. And it begins with humility, which is the bitter pill to swallow. But in humility, there is freedom. Humility makes a woman free. She's no longer tethered to what everyone else thinks she should be. That she can every single day rise up to who she is created to be, because she's willing to train herself. Now, humility, as we define it, comes from the root word humus, which is rich, dark soil in which all things can grow from. But really, humility, as we define it in the woman's school, is ownership of your call, which means that you have to train yourself to become who you were created to be, so you can actually own your purpose and your call in this world. So stay humble, stay kind, stay fierce, armor up for the battle, and train. And that's what we do in the woman's school, is we train women with the mindset and the skills that you need to armor up for the battle against evil. We have a free How to Be a Woman free course. It's free for all women, free coaching for 1 month. The whole course is a whole month. And you get to have a coach, a community, and the course. For the entirety of the course, it's free. So sign up, it's free. And, I was really inspired to create this course for such a time as this, to teach women to armor up for this battle. So sign up. There's a waiting list already, but this is how we begin to fight the battle, is that women are armoring up for this battle by training themselves. So click below to sign up for a free course. If this resonates with you, it's free. It's free for all. It's for all women. My teenagers are taking it. Grandmothers are taking it. We have a waiting list, but I believe that we can't continue to complain about our world. We have to train up for this world. And it requires that new woman who's willing to armor up for this battle. Go forth and conquer, armor up. You and I were made for such a time as this.